Week 3 is officially under wraps, and today I'll be bringing you guys my top 10 waiver claims entering Week 4 of fantasy football. We would have talked about some of these names on yesterday's live stream, but I want to give you guys the full in-depth top 10, how much fab I'd be willing to spend, and ultimately who are the bigger lineup stashes versus lineup options going into the next few weeks. But before we get into the formal top 10, let's talk about the players that should be rostered in your league, but if they are available, they are absolutely worth a spot on your benches. Cam Akers, running back of the Houston Texans. Joe Mixon still dealing with that ankle injury he suffered last Sunday night. Obviously, Dameon Pierce also dealing with his own injury. Cam Akers is getting the lion's share of the Texans' work. I expect that to continue should Joe Mixon and Dameon Pierce mix more time. Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver of the LA Rams, ran over 90% of the snaps this week, 4 targets in this game. Didn't really have a good connection with Stafford overall, but we expect, given the opportunity, given the volume he's sealing, that he could be a solid weekly boomer bust wide receiver 4. Chuba Hubbard, running back of the Carolina Panthers, 61% rostered in sleeper leagues. He had the exact week we were looking for. The Panthers offense didn't look like a complete train wreck, and Chuba Hubbard, until Jonathan Brooks gets back, looks like a workhorse fantasy running back. Until Jonathan Brooks is active, I think you can comfortably treat Chuba Hubbard as a top 24 to 30 running back play on each and any given week. Again, 26 opportunities in this game. I expect with Brooks out of the lineup, at least for the next week or so, Chuba Hubbard to get the lion's share of the work. And then finally, Chase Brown, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals, rostered in 56% of sleeper leagues. I understand that Zach Moss has worked ahead of Chase Brown, but should Moss miss any time or Chase Brown keep showing this efficiency and really cracks into that workload, I think Chase Brown has the upside to be a league winner in fantasy football. If he does become the main running back for the Cincinnati Bengals in one way or another, I think he has top 20, top 15 level upside. But moving on to the official waivers, we start off with the number 1 claim of the week, a guy rostered in 46% of sleeper leagues, a guy that I'd be willing to spend upwards of 20 to 30% of my fab on, if not even more if I had to ensure he is on my team. Braelon Allen, running back of the New York Jets. And the reason why he is my number 1 option is that I understand he's not the cleanest projection if you're talking about a guy that has to enter your lineup this week. But at the same time, he already shown he has standalone value in this Jets offense, 2 separate weeks of over 10 PPR points. But the main reason I have him at 101 is that there's not many guys you're going to get off the waiver wire that have legitimate league-breaking upside. And what I've seen from Braelon Allen in these first couple of weeks of his NFL career, he looks like one of the best running backs in the league. He looks like one of the top 5 to 10 running backs in the NFL based off the limited sample we've seen so far. 4.11 yards after contact per attempt, the highest graded running back according to PFF rushing grade. And should anything happen to Breece Hall, I think Braelon Allen has legitimate 20-plus point per game upside. So again, if you're 3-0 and you can go out and you can scoop Braelon Allen knowing it's more of an implied value play for your team, if he ends up hitting, your team is nearly unbeatable. So when I look at Braelon Allen, he is one of the ultimate leverage pieces in fantasy football, and I think he is a must-roster player. I have listed 20 to 30%. If you have to go even higher because you're 3-0 and you want all of the upside going into playoff weeks that Allen could bring to the table should Hall miss a game or two in that stretch, he is absolutely worth the bid. Braelon Allen, one of the highest upside players in fantasy. Waiver pickup number 2, we have Jauan Jennings, wide receiver of the San Francisco 49ers, rostered in 43% of sleeper leagues. Fab, I'd be willing to spend upwards of 15 to 20% to make sure he is on my team. He is one of the few value handcuffed wide receivers, if you will, in the sense that if we know any of the pass catchers for the 49ers is going to be out, Jauan Jennings' usage, Jauan Jennings' overall play goes up dramatically. Deebo Samuel obviously dealing with that short-term injury. I don't know what's going on with Brandon Ayuk. He is healthy, but he hasn't looked like himself. And, of course, George Kittle missed this week. Christian McCaffrey missed in the long term. So I think Jauan Jennings has an opportunity to really carve out a role in this offense. Now, is every week going to look like what he did this week where he scored nearly 50 PPR points? Not exactly, but does he have some implied upside should any of those top 49ers weapons miss time? And, in fact, should he have a little bit of standalone value knowing that he's building rapport in this offense, he's building trust from Brock Purdy? Absolutely. I think Jauan Jennings has to be rostered at this point. Again, I'm not going to spend 40, 50% if that's what the going rate is in your league based off what he did last week. But I do still think he's a must-roster player because I feel confident putting him in my lineup if any of the 49ers' other weapons are out. Number 3 pickup is Bucky Irving, running back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 44% rostered in sleeper leagues. A guy I'd be willing to spend upwards of 15 to 20% of my fab on. And with Bucky Irving, again, I would prefer Braelon Allen, But if you need a spot start this week, I actually think Bucky Irving will be higher in my rankings going into week 4. Bucky Irving really carved out a nice role in this Tampa Bay Buccaneers rushing attack, handled the majority workload between the tackles. And we've already seen reports that Todd Bowles wants to increasingly get him more involved. You see this from Coach Speak Index. Todd Bowles on average an 80% reliability rating when it comes to depth chart, usage related type of work. Bucky Irving has looked good. He's looked straight up better than Rachaad White between the tackles. Well, I still think Rachaad White will be the, third down, long down, and distance back. I do think Bucky Irving has the opportunity to carve out the majority workload between the tackles. I think this could be a situation where if Rachaad White's getting, 16, 17 opportunities per game, we could see Bucky Irving in the 13, 14 area. Xavier Legette, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers, comes in at number 4 for me, rostered in 35% of sleeper leagues. Guy I'd be also willing to spend upwards of 15 to 20% of my fab on. Big breaking news of this week, obviously, the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, is inserted as the starting quarterback for the Panthers. And this Panthers offense ends up scoring 36 points on the road against the Raiders. A lot of these Panthers offensive players will now see a big uptick in value, seeing how good the offense could potentially be with Dalton. And I think Xavier Legette is next up. We know Deontay Johnson gained value. I just mentioned Chuba Hubbard gaining value at least until Jonathan Brooks comes back. Xavier Legette, with the news that Adam Thielen is expected to miss multiple weeks with a hamstring injury, has the upside to break your league. We're talking about a 4.3 speed, 220-plus pound wide receiver that was selected in the first round. 59% of the snaps this week. If he becomes a full-time player, he becomes a 80, 85+% route player. We're talking about a guy that can change the complexion on the game on any single given target. So with me, with Xavier Legette, I understand, we'll get into some of the other options that maybe have some more short-term appeal for your lineup, but I think Xavier Legette is the home run swing at wide receiver this week. Number 5 pickup of the week, we got Roschon Johnson, running back of the Chicago Bears. I think you can also classify Khalil Herbert, his teammate, in this list, but this is basically just the anti-DeAndre Swift claim. DeAndre Swift has been one of the most inefficient running backs in the league, less than 2 yards per carry on the season. I think that we're going to see a dynamic shift in the Bears offense moving forward. We already saw glimpses of it on Sunday where they went very pass happy. Roschon Johnson comes into the game, 5 targets in that game. I think we're going to both see the Bears pass the ball more and Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert supplement their rushing attack a lot more DeAndre Swift. I think there's a very real possibility even going into this week that DeAndre Swift is going to go the Miles Sanders route, get benched, and these other 2 running backs are going to see significant upticks in value. For me, my preferred option is Roschon Johnson. He did get the nod in the passing game, is a much better overall pass blocker than Khalil Herbert, and showed he has some juice in the receiving game. And I don't expect this to be a team that's going to be operating from many lead game scripts. So when I'm looking at it, I trust Caleb. I trust those receivers to make this a pass-happy offense. I want the running back that will be on the field when they are passing the football. And to me, that screams Roschon Johnson. But like I said, I also think Khalil Herbert is a very good pickup this week. 15 to 20% for Roschon Johnson, 5 to 10% for Khalil Herbert is how I'd be dividing up my fab budget. Waiver pickup number 6, we have Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you see the jersey hanging behind me with the Zeke Elliott over my shoulder, but with Jalen Tolbert, his role has increased each and every week for this Cowboys offense, and he's legitimately played over 80% of the routes each of the last 2 weeks. Double-digit PPR points in both those games. I think there's a real possibility that Jalen Tolbert can wrestle that wide receiver 2 role away from Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks hasn't really looked like himself the last couple of weeks, and Jalen Tolbert has made a good amount of plays. He's developing trust with Dak Prescott. This is an offense that's devoid of weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, and I'm putting my faith on the third-year young breakout wide receiver in Jalen Tolbert, who's already put up some good film in his first 3 weeks. If I'm going to bet on one of the other players that isn't Jake Ferguson, that isn't CeeDee Lamb in this offense, it's going to be Jalen Tolbert at this point. Number 7, we got Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver of the New York Giants. I'd be willing to spend upwards of 10 to 15% of my fab on him, and he's currently rostered in 34% of sleeper leagues. Wan'Dale Robinson has quietly been really good, and not to mention the factor that is Malik Neighbors has opened up the entire rest of the New York Giants offense. Having one superstar wide receiver on your team has made Daniel Jones look better and has helped Wan'Dale Robinson increase the amount of space he is operating within. We know Wan'Dale Robinson, not the biggest downfield threat, but what he does so well is absorb targets in the middle of the field, get some yak opportunity, and that has really worked in this offense so far. Wan'Dale Robinson is commanding targets. He's looked good, and he is my bet for the number 2 overall weapon on this Giants offense. We know Malik Neighbors is an absolute superstar at this point. I think Wan'Dale Robinson can give you wide receiver 4 level utility in your deeper flex leagues. If you're in a PPR league, you have a second flex, and you need somebody to start in a pinch, Wan'Dale Robinson is one of my favorite depth options on the waiver wire this week. Again, I wouldn't go overboard 10 to 15%, but if you are in a deeper league, start 10, 5, 6 bench spots, I think Wan'Dale Robinson is a very good depth piece to have. And the same applies for Michael Wilson, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals, 13% rostered in sleeper leagues. I'd bid a little bit less on Wilson than I would on Wan'Dale, but I do think anywhere between the 5 to 15% on both of them is a very valid bid. And I think Michael Wilson is the biggest beneficiary of the Trey McBride injury. Obviously, hate to see it. Goes down with a concussion. I hope Trey McBride's okay. But at least for the short term, if he's expected to miss at least 1 to 2 weeks, Michael Wilson showed he can command targets on this team. We know Marv, all-world, superstar level talent, is going to be the #1 wide receiver weapon on this team. But I think Michael Wilson can play a, Michael Pittman possession level role in this offense, commanded 9 targets in relief of Trey McBride's injury this week. I expect that level of involvement to continue when McBride is not in the lineup. I think you can consider him a legitimate top 45 wide receiver play if Trey McBride is ruled out this week. Number 9, we got Antonio Gibson, running back of the New England Patriots, 27% rostered in sleeper leagues. I'd be willing to spend upwards of 5 to 7% of my fab on him. And Ramondre Stevenson left briefly with a finger injury in this game, but even if we're expecting Ramondre Stevenson to be the starter next week, which I am, I think Antonio Gibson, like Braelon Allen, like Bucky Irving, is one of the bigger upside handcuffs you can have in fantasy. Not often are you going to get a backup running back that is the clear handcuff to his team that has 220 plus pounds, 4.3 speed, has a 3-down workload like he showed in Washington. If Ramondre Stevenson were to miss any time, I think Gibson is one of the best implied plays in fantasy. On top of that, again, the offense as a whole right now, not the ideal situation. But I do think once Drake May comes in, we could see a ton of value added to this offense. So with Antonio Gibson, should Ramondre miss any time, maybe he re-aggravates the finger injury, or, this is a guy who missed a couple of weeks last year and we saw Ezekiel Elliott step in. I think Antonio Gibson has not only Ezekiel Elliott from last year upside where he had some RB2, RB3 utility, but I think Antonio Gibson would have legitimate top 15 level upside in lieu of a Ramondre Stevenson absence. And then finally, number 10, we have Darnell Mooney, wide receiver of the Atlanta Falcons. He's currently rostered in 43% of sleeper leagues. And again, another guy I'd be willing to spend upwards of 5 to 10% of my fab budget on. He's been surprisingly involved in these first few games, and he looks like the clear-cut number 3 target for this team in the pass-catching game. We know it's going to be Kyle Pitts. We know it's going to be Drake London. I think Darnell Mooney has established himself as the clear wide receiver 3 on this team. He's run in the last 3 weeks 100%, 100%, and 97% of the team routes. And we've seen his target involvement increase massively in the last 2. 23% target share 2 weeks ago, 30% target share this past week. We've seen him pile 2 straight top 24 wide receiver performances. I think he's a good football player. This Falcons offense is looking a lot better, and I think he is worthy of being on your benches moving forward. But either way, if you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like down below. Comment your biggest waiver wire decisions. I will try to get to as many as possible. And of course, if you want access to all of our weekly rankings moving forward, there's one of 2 ways you can get it right now. First way, going over to flockfantasy.com using promo code FSE. You will get a 7-day free trial plus 30% off any site-wide package you choose, as well as going over to Underdog Fantasy using promo code FSC and depositing $10. You will be getting access to all of our weekly rankings moving forward. It has matchups that matter, has our rankings by positional. It is the #1 resource to make you a better fantasy football player this season. I appreciate you guys for that continued support. Take care. Good luck on the waiver wire. Let's get those bids in.